Previously, I illustrated how the infinite is conquerable. Today I'm feeling quite bold, and therefore decided to double it down and go all in by proclaiming that the impossible is impossible. Something that real things cannot have as an attribute. Just a disclaimer, I'm going to use strings of logic to prove my statements, and when strings of logic are used, it usually leads to confusion because of its simplistic nature. So it may be difficult to comprehend, and therefore it will be recommended to rewatch certain parts. Now with that out of the way, let's start with the first statement. The impossible is impossible. Right now you may think, yeah duh, things that are impossible are impossible. Fuck. Yeah, of course, that's exactly what I mean. By the definition of impossible, it is something that is not possible. Therefore, by its definition, the impossible is not possible. Do you get it? Let's put it this way. When we refer to something as impossible, we are referencing to the concept impossible. When we say it is impossible, meaning by its nature, it is not possible, something that cannot be done, the concept we are referencing to, impossible, must also inherit the not possible nature, because it is our source to this not possible nature. Otherwise, when we refer something else as impossible, it will not get the not possible nature. Just imagine if you refer something as good, but because good does not have good in its nature, the thing will not be good. Therefore, good needs to be good, strong needs to be strong, and perfect needs to be perfect. I know this is much to comprehend, but in simpler terms, 1 must equal to 1, 2 must equal to 2, and 3 must equal to 3. And therefore, by its nature, the impossible must be impossible, meaning the impossible must be not possible. Something that cannot be or be done. Hence, things cannot be impossible, because if it were, it is a thing that does not exist, which is not a real thing. Want some more? I'll give you another example. The possible is possible. Same logic here. When we refer to things as possible, we are referencing the concept possible, and for things to become possible when we are referencing to the concept possible, possible needs to be possible. By its own nature, the possible must be possible, meaning the possible is achievable. And because the impossible is impossible, only nothingness, things that cannot exist, things that cannot be done or achieved can truly be impossible. Therefore, everything that can exist must be possible. And this leads me to my second statement. Absolute nothing is impossible, and absolute everything is possible. Now look, because this is a string of logic, you have to take it literally, not metaphorically or any other way of interpretation. So, nothing, literally nothing, is impossible, and everything, literally everything, is possible, which means everything that can exist, absolute everything, can be done, and everything that cannot exist, absolute nothing, cannot be done. You can test it out right now. Go and watch a video that does not exist. Yeah, it is impossible, because to be able to watch a video, first it has to be recorded into a video, but as soon as you have recorded a video, it exists, and therefore you cannot watch the video that did not exist. That is an example of the impossible nature of doing something that does not and cannot exist. Because the thing does not exist, it is part of the non-existing world. Absolute nothing. And absolute nothing is impossible to achieve. You might object to the impossible nature of absolute nothing by pointing out the example of an absolute vacuum in space. I see where you're coming from. At first glance, it seems like there's nothing in a vacuum, no matter, no energy. But even in absolute vacuum, something still remains, the fabric of space itself. If absolute nothingness truly existed, then even the fabric of space would be gone, and if space itself were gone, we wouldn't even be able to talk about it, because there will be no space there at all. The only reason we can describe a vacuum is because something still exists, the structure that holds it. Now let's visualize this in an even clearer way. Imagine a universe where only the cosmos exists, nothing beyond it. Now ask yourself, what lies outside the universe? You might say absolute nothing, but here's the problem. If absolute nothing were truly outside the universe, then there would be no outside at all. No space, no place, no reference point. We wouldn't even be able to talk about an outside, because there will be no existence beyond the universe to define it. Meaning the only thing that can exist is what actually exists. Absolute nothing cannot exist, because if it did, it would be something rather than nothing. Therefore, absolute nothing is impossible. Now that was a lot to digest, and I have to admit, this is quite confusing. After all, that's the nature of the simplest truths. They're often the hardest to see because they're hidden in plain sight. Just like how it took modern humans over 10,000 years to recognize the most elementary force that affects everything, gravity. It was always there, shaping the world around us, yet it took us millennia to truly understand it. So what is the meaning of all of this? Most people go through their entire lives with false perception of reality. They assume without real reason, and they make up false rules to reality. And when you live by false rules, rules that do not exist, life becomes a game that you can never win. The perception that things can truly be impossible is one of the biggest false rules people fall into. And once you believe something is impossible, you make it so, not because it is, but because you stop trying. That's the real tragedy, when people pursue fulfilling dreams but give up, not because they failed, but because they falsely believed they couldn't succeed. But what if we could see past these false rules? What if we acknowledge that the impossible is not part of reality? Let's illustrate it in a simple story. In the 21st century, there's a boy named Little John. His dream is to become one of the greatest football players in the world. But one day he gets in a car accident and gets completely paralyzed from the waist down. His already difficult dream of becoming one of the greatest football players in the world now sounds impossible, right? But Little John doesn't see the world that way. He doesn't live by false rules. He acknowledged that absolute nothing is impossible. Therefore, instead of accepting his fate, he dedicated his entire life to proving possibility where others see limits. He studies relentlessly, mastering genetic engineering. He builds companies, earning billions to fund his research. For 60 years, he worked tirelessly, pushing the boundaries of science. And then after decades of struggle, he succeeds. His breakthrough in genetic engineering allows him not only to walk again, but enhance himself beyond human limits. Now John is no longer Little John, but Big John. At age 70, his body is stronger, faster and more agile than any 20-year-old professional athlete. With his newfound ability, he doesn't just play football, he dominates. He wins matches, defies expectation, and carves his name into history as one of the greatest football players of all time. And all because that he understood the simple truth. Absolute nothing is impossible, and absolute everything is possible. You too can become like Little John, and all you have to do is let go of the false perceptions and see reality as it truly is. When false perceptions disappear, we are free to rise to every height that we lay eyes on. Then the only limit becomes our will to conquer new heights and imagination for ideas to be manifested into reality. In the end, everything is achievable, because impossible is only a word. And as always, glory to Negus Carlsen.